There is something you need to understand before you move through today, because what unfolds on Saturday, August 15th, is not simply another movement in the sky that passes through your day and disappears. This is a convergence, and the reason it may feel unusually personal is because two very different cosmic currents are arriving at the same time, one opening the heart through expression, and the other opening the heart through emotional connection. The moon moves into Libra and comes directly toward Venus, already established there and expressing herself with exceptional strength in her own sign. At the same time, Mercury and Jupiter come together in Leo, creating one of the most expansive and expressive conjunctions we have experienced this year. These two major events share the same day, and together they create a rare opening in which love, romance, emotional honesty, and genuine connection become much more available than usual. But there is something beneath the beauty of this moment that you cannot afford to overlook. Every powerful opening carries a responsibility, and this one has a hidden side that could change the entire experience if you move through it unconsciously. What looks like the most beautiful romantic opportunity of your year could become unstable within only a few days if you mistake emotional intensity for emotional truth. That is why I want you to pay close attention, because the energy coming today is not asking you simply to feel more. It is asking you to recognize what your feelings are actually revealing. And if you have spent this entire week feeling strangely emotional, unusually sensitive, or almost unsettled by memories and wounds you believed had already healed, there is a very specific reason for that reaction. Something began on August 12th, and that earlier event is part of the story we are now entering. Before we can understand why today can bring such powerful romantic and emotional movement, we have to look backward for a moment, because the ground beneath you has already shifted. Whether you consciously recognized it or not, this week has already altered something inside your reality. The eclipse has already done its work. 3 days ago, a total solar eclipse occurred in Leo, and as you looked at that event only as an extraordinary astronomical display, you may have missed the deeper symbolic meaning of what you were experiencing. This eclipse was not simply about darkness passing across the sun. It represented the removal of an older version of yourself, the version that had been carrying patterns, attachments, and emotional habits long after they had stopped serving you. It began separating you from connections that had become entangled with your identity. It brought an ending to patterns you may have repeated for months, perhaps even years, without fully understanding why you kept returning to them. It touched old relationship dynamics, old ways of searching for approval, and old stories you had created about what you were allowed to expect from love. What makes this kind of transformation difficult is that it does not always arrive with an obvious dramatic event. Sometimes the deepest internal changes begin quietly. You may have simply woken up exhausted for no clear reason. You may have experienced a sudden heaviness in your chest, or a wave of sadness that seemed to have no logical explanation. Perhaps an old memory appeared without warning. Perhaps you suddenly thought about someone you had not considered in a long time. Perhaps you found yourself remembering an emotion, a relationship, or an earlier version of yourself that you thought had already been placed safely in the past. You may even have wondered why something you believed you had moved beyond suddenly felt close again. According to the symbolism of this eclipse, that return was not meaningless. It was part of the clearing process. Something was being brought into awareness so that you could finally see it without continuing to carry it unconsciously. The old emotional debris was being disturbed. The roots of patterns that no longer belonged in your life were being exposed. And this is where the story becomes much more important than the eclipse itself, because whenever something is removed, something else becomes possible. The eclipse created an opening. It took something away, and in doing so, it left space behind. That space may feel unfamiliar because it did not exist inside you in quite the same way 1 week ago. It can feel raw. It can feel empty. It can even feel uncomfortable because human beings often prefer familiar pain to unfamiliar freedom. When an old attachment disappears, part of you may immediately want to replace it simply because the silence feels strange. When an old identity loosens, the mind can rush to rebuild it because uncertainty is difficult to tolerate. But this empty space is not necessarily a problem. It can be fertile. It can be the beginning of something that could not enter while the old pattern was still occupying the room. And today, August 15th, that space becomes the central stage for the next movement. The question is not whether something can enter. The question is what you are prepared to allow into that opening. The cosmos is presenting an extraordinary possibility, but receiving something new requires you to recognize that something old has already been cleared away. Many people will miss the significance of today because they will experience the energy without understanding the preparation that came before it. They may interpret a sudden attraction as random. They may dismiss an emotional conversation as coincidence. They may overlook the significance of a message, an unexpected interaction, or a moment of recognition because they do not realize that their inner landscape has already been changing. But if you have felt the shift, if you have sensed that something has been different inside you, that awareness is part of why this moment may speak to you so directly. Today is not simply another transit. It is the meeting point between what has been removed and what is now capable of entering. So let us look carefully at what happens on August 15th, because the scale of this convergence is easy to underestimate. At 1:30 p.m., Mercury forms an exact conjunction with Jupiter at 10 degrees of Leo. This brings together the planet associated with thought and communication and the planet associated with expansion, amplification, and greater reach, all within Leo, the sign connected with the heart, courage, self-expression, and the willingness to be seen without hiding behind unnecessary defenses. Think about what that means psychologically. There are words you may have carried inside yourself for a long time. There may be a message you repeatedly composed in your mind but never sent. There may be a conversation you have rehearsed privately, changing the opening sentence again and again because some part of you was afraid of what would happen if the truth finally became audible. There may be affection you kept contained because expressing it would make you vulnerable. There may be a truth sitting inside your chest that has felt almost like another heartbeat, waiting for a moment when you felt safe enough to release it. The Mercury-Jupiter conjunction in Leo can symbolize a moment when that internal voice becomes much harder to suppress. You may not have planned to say what you say. You may not have expected yourself to speak so openly. You may discover that something you have been thinking about privately suddenly becomes something you are willing to express aloud. The important point is that communication becomes larger. Your thoughts can feel more significant to you. Your words can feel more charged. The impulse to explain, confess, reveal, encourage, or express yourself can become stronger because Jupiter expands whatever it touches, while Leo gives that expression warmth, confidence, courage, and emotional presence. Then, only a few hours later, at 4:20 p.m., the moon enters Libra, where Venus is already present, shining through her own sign and functioning with great strength. This creates a completely different emotional atmosphere, but instead of competing with the earlier conjunction, it complements it. The moon represents emotional needs, instinct, sensitivity, and the deeper responses that can arise before the rational mind has had time to organize them. Venus represents attraction, affection, beauty, desire, harmony, and relational connection. When the moon comes toward Venus in Libra, emotion meets attraction, need meets beauty, inner feeling meets the desire to connect with another person. For a brief and unusual window, the emotional current can become concentrated around one central human need: connection. Not empty attention, not superficial chemistry, not the temporary excitement of being noticed. The deeper kind of connection that creates the feeling that someone has actually recognized the part of you that you usually keep hidden. This is where the combination of Leo and Libra becomes especially meaningful. Leo brings fire, courage, warmth, and the willingness to express what lives in the heart. Libra brings air, balance, receptivity, relational awareness, and an instinct for meeting another person with grace. One current encourages you to speak what is true for you. The other creates an atmosphere in which that truth may be received with greater openness and elegance. Together, they create a symbolic exchange between courage and harmony. You are not simply being encouraged to say something. You're being placed in an atmosphere where what you say may carry more emotional weight than you expected. This is why today may surprise you. The same sentence that would normally pass unnoticed may suddenly reach someone in a completely different way. A simple comment could touch a deeper emotional place. A message could redirect the emotional movement of a relationship. A playful remark could cause someone to look at you with fresh attention, almost as though they are seeing a side of you they had never fully noticed before. You may not be consciously attempting to charm anyone. You may not even realize that your presence is affecting another person differently. Yet the symbolic effect of Mercury and Jupiter together in Leo is amplification. Your communication becomes broader, warmer, more expressive, and potentially more persuasive. Jupiter increases reach. Leo gives the message heart. And when those qualities combine, even ordinary words can seem to carry more presence. But this is exactly where you must become conscious, because expansion does not discriminate between what is healthy and what is unhealthy. Jupiter does not amplify only the beautiful parts of an experience. It can magnify whatever is already present. If you speak from genuine confidence, that confidence can become stronger. If you speak from authentic affection, the warmth of that affection can become more visible. But if insecurity is driving you, insecurity can also become louder. If you feel compelled to impress someone because you are afraid they will not value you as you are, that impulse can become exaggerated. If you make promises because the emotional intensity of the moment makes restraint difficult, those promises may become larger than what you can realistically fulfill. This is why today requires awareness rather than simply excitement. Before you speak, before you send the message, before you reveal something deeply personal, pause long enough to ask yourself whether the substance of what you're expressing is strong enough to carry the emotional force behind it. The intensity of the moment can make words feel inevitable, but words still create consequences. What you express today can continue to echo after the day itself has passed. That is why the deepest question is not whether you have the courage to speak. It is whether what you are about to say is aligned with what you genuinely mean. Then there is another layer to this day that you may feel before you can explain it. An attraction may begin to emerge with unusual clarity. You may already sense the beginning of it today, perhaps as a subtle emotional pull that seems difficult to rationalize. This is not necessarily simple nostalgia. It may feel directional, almost as though your attention is being drawn toward a particular person or connection. You could suddenly find yourself thinking about someone you already know. It could be a friend you have never allowed yourself to consider through a romantic lens. It could be someone whose presence captures your attention unexpectedly in the middle of a crowded room. It could even be your existing partner suddenly appearing different to you, as though you are briefly seeing them through the eyes you had at the beginning, before familiarity and routine softened the original intensity. The moon moving toward Venus in Libra speaks directly to this relational pull. The moon carries your emotional instincts, your private needs, and the reactions that often happen beneath conscious reasoning. Venus in Libra is operating in her own sign, emphasizing attraction and partnership. Together, they can create a feeling of being drawn towards something that reflects an important part of yourself. Libra is associated with the mirror, not because you cannot know yourself alone, but because relationship can reveal dimensions of the self that remain invisible in isolation. Sometimes you discover what you need only when another person shows you what feels peaceful. Sometimes you understand what you value only after experiencing what does not honor it. Sometimes another person becomes a mirror that reveals the version of you that has been waiting to be acknowledged. Today, that symbolic mirror becomes stronger. You may become more aware of who allows you to feel seen without forcing you to perform. You may notice who receives your truth without making you feel that you must shrink it. You may recognize the difference between being desired and being understood. And that distinction matters because the clearing that began with the eclipse has already changed the emotional space within you. What you are drawn toward today may therefore reveal something about what truly belongs in that newly opened space. The deeper invitation is not to chase every attraction or interpret every emotion as destiny. It is to pay attention to what your emotional response is showing you about connection, recognition, affection, and the kind of relationship in which you can actually be yourself. If someone suddenly feels unusually significant, notice what happens inside you when you are near them. If a conversation feels unexpectedly meaningful, notice what part of you becomes more alive through it. If your partner suddenly appears through a different lens, notice what has awakened in your perception. The point is not to force an outcome. The point is to recognize the mirror when it appears. Today, your inner world may reach toward that mirror, and through that reflection, you may gain a clearer understanding of who truly has a place within your life and who does not. That realization brings us directly to the next layer of this powerful day. Because once the heart recognizes what it is being drawn toward, the question becomes what you will do with what you have finally seen. Do not push this feeling away when it arrives today, because what you experience may be much more than a passing emotion that your mind can explain away. The moon does not ask you to build a logical argument before you are allowed to feel something. It speaks through instinct, through the body, through the quiet reaction that appears before your thoughts have had time to organize themselves. That is why today you should pay attention to the direction of your emotional pull instead of immediately questioning whether it makes sense. There are 3 zodiac signs in particular who are positioned to experience this romantic energy in a much more direct and personal way. And for them, this is not simply another pleasant day under beautiful planetary conditions. The relationship areas of their charts are being activated in a way that can mark a genuine turning point. The first is Libra, and Libra today asks you to stop hiding the very qualities that make you naturally magnetic. Venus, your ruling planet, has been moving through your first house, your own sign and your own personal territory since August 6th. During this time, something within you has been quietly rebuilding itself. Perhaps you did not notice it immediately, but your confidence has been returning. Your sense of attractiveness has been strengthening. The part of you that can enter a room without demanding attention and somehow still change the atmosphere has been coming back to life. You may have spent a long time questioning whether you were still capable of feeling that radiant, that open, that naturally appealing. Yet Venus has been restoring that quality from the inside outward. Then today, the moon enters Libra and joins Venus there, bringing your emotional nature directly into contact with the planet of attraction, affection, beauty, and connection. This is important because your desires and your emotional needs are no longer pulling you in opposite directions. For once, the thing your heart wants and the thing your deeper emotional self requires can point toward the same place. Think about how unusual that can be for you. You often spend enormous amounts of energy considering everyone else. You weigh one side against the other. You notice what another person needs before you ask yourself what you need. You try to preserve harmony, sometimes at the cost of your own truth. You can become so focused on maintaining balance that you forget that balance was never supposed to mean abandoning yourself. Today, balance becomes something you embody, rather than something you have to manage. You are not required to keep adjusting yourself so everyone else remains comfortable. You are allowed to occupy your own space fully. That shift alone can change the way people respond to you. Others may notice something different in your presence, not because you are performing, flirting, or deliberately attempting to attract attention, but because you are becoming more comfortable being exactly who you are. Authenticity has a power that performance cannot reproduce. When you stop trying to convince people that you are worthy of being chosen, your natural presence becomes much more compelling. But there is one lesson Libra must take seriously today. You have to allow yourself to receive. You may have a familiar habit of dismissing compliments, laughing away at tension, changing the subject when someone expresses admiration, or making yourself smaller because you do not want another person to feel uncomfortable. You may even instinctively give the attention back to someone else instead of accepting it for yourself. Today, do not do that. If affection reaches you, let it reach you. If someone notices you, allow yourself to be noticed. If someone speaks warmly about you, resist the urge to immediately explain why they are wrong. You do not have to apologize for being desirable. You do not have to make your light less visible. simply because someone else might be surprised by how brightly you are shining. And there is another reason you should watch your social environment closely. Mercury and Jupiter are activating your 11th house of friendships, community, networks, and social circles. This means romantic energy may not arrive through the obvious doorway. It may come through a friend who introduces you to someone. It may appear at a gathering where you unexpectedly meet a person whose presence captures your attention. It may emerge through someone who has been part of your wider social world for a long time, someone you have always categorized as a friend or familiar connection, only to suddenly realize that the emotional dynamic has changed. What you thought was ordinary may reveal another layer. So Libra, do not limit today by deciding in advance what romance is supposed to look like. Let the people around you show you what is possible. The second sign is Gemini, and Gemini, today your greatest romantic advantage is your voice. Listen carefully because the way you communicate is about to become one of the most powerful forces in your love life. Venus in Libra is moving through your 5th house, the part of your chart associated with romance, pleasure, attraction, creative expression, and the pure excitement of falling for someone because being around them makes life feel more alive. This is an environment where romance does not have to feel like an obligation or an exhausting search for approval. It can feel playful again. It can feel spontaneous. It can feel like something you participate in because it brings genuine joy into your life. There is an artistic quality to this energy, as though attraction becomes less about strategy and more about natural expression. Yet Venus in your 5th house is only part of what makes today significant for you. Mercury, your ruling planet, is forming a conjunction with Jupiter in Leo, and this conjunction is occurring in your 3rd house, the house of communication, conversation, messages, ideas, learning, and the way you connect your inner world with the people around you. Consider the symbolism of that combination. Your ruling planet is being amplified by Jupiter, precisely where your natural gift for communication is most visible. This is why your words can carry unusual impact today. You may say something clever, but it will not simply sound clever. You may say something affectionate, but it may remain in another person's mind much longer than you expect. You may send a message that seems ordinary to you, and discover later that the other person read it several times. A conversation over dinner could shift the emotional direction of a relationship. A playful comment could make someone suddenly understand that the attraction they have felt around you has been there longer than they realized. Your communication can become memorable because your words are carrying more warmth, confidence, and emotional presence. For Gemini singles, this can accelerate the romantic atmosphere in a way that feels almost like something from a movie, where one ordinary interaction suddenly becomes the beginning of an entirely different story. But if you're already in a relationship, the same energy can be used differently. This can be a moment to remind your partner why the connection began in the first place. Bring back the playfulness, surprise them, change the routine, say something you have not said in a long time. Let the relationship breathe again instead of allowing familiarity to become emotional background noise. Remember the version of yourself that was curious about them. Remember the version of them that made you laugh without trying. The purpose is not to recreate the past perfectly, but to recover the lightness that routine may have gradually covered. At the same time, Gemini, you must remain grounded because Jupiter expands whatever it touches. Excitement can become exaggeration if you are not careful. You could become so carried away by the beauty of the moment that you promise more than you are ready to deliver. You could speak about a future before you have truly considered whether your actions can support those words. So allow yourself to be expressive, but do not confuse intensity with certainty. Let your words be enthusiastic without becoming promises you cannot keep. Think before you speak, and then make sure that what you say actually represents what you mean. Under this energy, words can have a longer life than the moment in which they are spoken. The third sign is Aries. And Aries, your experience today is different because the central lesson is not simply about attraction or expression. It is about allowing another person to come close without interpreting vulnerability as weakness. Venus and the Moon are both moving through your 7th house, the house of committed partnership, marriage, long-term relationships, and the person who stands opposite you and consciously chooses you. For someone with your independent and warrior-like nature, this can feel confronting. You are accustomed to moving forward through your own strength. You understand independence. You understand pursuit. You understand how to fight for what matters. But the seventh house asks a different kind of courage from you. It asks you to make room for another person. It asks you to recognize that partnership is not the destruction of independence. It is the willingness to share your world without treating closeness as a threat. This is where the deeper paradox appears. Mercury and Jupiter are meeting in your fifth house of romance, passion, pleasure, creativity, and desire. So there is a powerful spark rising inside you. You may feel an urge to love boldly, speak openly, flirt without overthinking, and express the part of yourself that wants to experience life intensely. Yet at the same time, the relationship energy is asking you to direct that fire towards something capable of lasting. You are being challenged to hold passion and consideration together. You're being asked to care about another person's needs with the same seriousness that you bring to your own. That is the real test for Aries in this moment. Can you experience passion without turning passion into conflict? Can you allow another person to get close without assuming that closeness will eventually cost you your freedom? Can you show tenderness without feeling that you have surrendered your strength? These questions matter because the total solar eclipse on August 12th has already begun changing you. Whether you consciously wanted that change or not, the eclipse has started removing some of the protective armor you have carried for too long. Armor can protect you when you need it, but there comes a point when the same armor that once kept you safe begins preventing you from receiving anything new. Today, you may find yourself standing in that newly opened emotional space without the defenses that once made vulnerability easier to avoid. And because the space is open, someone or something may reach you in a way that you have not experienced for a very long time. Do not immediately run from that feeling. The strongest version of the warrior is not the one who never needs anyone. The strongest version is the one who can remain powerful while allowing the heart to stay open. Today, the cosmos is challenging you to become that version of yourself. But before you surrender completely to the beauty of this energy, there is an important warning you need to understand. Remember the shadow side we discussed earlier. The beautiful opening of August 15th does not exist in isolation, and the days that follow will test whether what begins under this energy has real substance. On August 17th, only 2 days after this romantic window opens, Mars in Cancer forms a square with Neptune. This is where certainty can become difficult to hold. Mars represents action, desire, pursuit, and the way you move toward what you want, while Neptune can dissolve boundaries and make perception more uncertain. Under their square, something that felt completely obvious may suddenly become difficult to interpret. The confidence you felt could begin to weaken. A connection that seemed undeniable could suddenly raise questions. You may replay conversations and wonder what someone actually meant. You may analyze a pause, a glance, a delayed response, or a change in tone until you are no longer sure which parts came from the other person and which parts came from your own imagination. It can feel like waking from an incredibly vivid dream and suddenly questioning which details were real and which were created by your mind. A bold statement made on August 15th might begin to feel too large afterward. Someone who seemed almost destined for you could become distant or stop responding to a message. What felt like certainty could dissolve into confusion. That does not automatically mean that the original connection was meaningless. It means that clarity can become harder to maintain when Mars and Neptune create this tension. This is precisely why you should not build an entire future around one emotionally intense moment. Then, on August 21st, Venus opposes Saturn, bringing another layer of reality into the situation. Saturn is not interested in fantasy simply because fantasy feels beautiful. Saturn asks whether something has structure. Saturn asks whether what was created during an emotional high can survive ordinary life. Saturn asks whether affection can become responsibility, whether attraction can become consistency, and whether the person you imagined is actually the person standing in front of you. This is why what you create today matters, but the way you create it matters even more. Do not build a relationship around an idealized version of someone. Do not mistake potential for reality. Do not construct emotional certainty from promises that have not yet been demonstrated through action. Do not fall in love only with what you hope someone will become, while ignoring what they consistently show you today. The connections capable of surviving the next 2 weeks are the ones grounded in honesty, substance, consistency, and the willingness to see another person clearly, including their imperfections, and still make a conscious choice about whether that relationship deserves your presence. That is the kind of love that can survive beyond a transit. That is the kind of love that becomes meaningful because it continues to exist after the intensity has faded. And this brings us to the deepest gift of August 15th. If there is one thing I want you to remember above everything else, it is that this day is not promising you a flawless fairy tale. The purpose of these energies is not to create a life without complications. The deeper purpose is growth. Growth requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires the willingness to stop hiding behind the version of yourself that feels safest and allow yourself to be seen as you actually are. The greatest gift of August 15th is not simply Mercury and Jupiter making your words more magnetic. It is not only the Moon and Venus creating a softer and more affectionate emotional atmosphere. The deeper gift is permission. Permission to want love without feeling embarrassed about wanting it. Permission to say what lives inside your heart without analyzing the feeling until it disappears. Permission to believe that what you desire may also be moving toward you. There is a truth that many people struggle to admit, and it is not always that they cannot find love. Sometimes they struggle because somewhere along the way they stopped believing they were allowed to receive it. They learned to expect disappointment. They learned to protect themselves before anyone could reject them. They learned to question affection because accepting it felt more dangerous than going without it. Today offers a different message. You are allowed to desire love. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to express affection. You are allowed to express affection. You are allowed to receive attention without immediately wondering what you must give in return. The astrology of this moment points toward that message through every planet, every transit, and every degree described in this window. You are ready to participate in the possibility instead of standing outside it. Real love does not require you to earn your right to experience it. What may be required is that you stop running from it when it finally approaches. So when that attraction appears today, when your attention is pulled toward someone or something, do not immediately destroy the feeling with fear. Do not make yourself smaller. Do not hide behind endless analysis because you remember how the last situation ended. The eclipse has already cleared part of the path. The planets are already positioned. The opportunity is already present. What remains is your decision about whether you will step through the opening that has appeared. And as you continue into what comes next, remember that the real measure of this moment will not be how intense it feels today. It will be what remains true after the intensity has passed, because that is where the difference between a beautiful moment and something genuinely meaningful begins.